And yes, friends, this is where the magic happens and where people sit down to have the seminars. And the next one we're going to talk about is going to be the Call of Cthulhu. The two new designers, well, they're not new designers, they have designed things in the past. They're doing the new edition, the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu, which promises quite a few changes to the system.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Cthulhu. Do you want to see my Cthulhu joke?
Yes.
Yeah, what's this? Cthulhu on a motorbike. But it's really nice to be in the council chamber for these seminars. I think it already has made a difference, and I think it's much better than the venue from last year by all accounts. So it'd be good to see the much more people able to come in and to hear the guys talking about the new Cthulhu, because that's been a bit controversial with the idea of, oh, do we really need a 7th version? So, you know. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing how have they chosen the changes that they are going to bring into the system, and how they're going to inject new old one blood into the old into the old system. I'm quite interested in finding out.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think people are a bit resistant. I mean, after D&D and all the kind of 3rd generation, 4th generation stuff and the Pathfinder splitting off, I think they have to be really careful. What will be interesting to see how well they manage the community here might reflect on how well they manage the community generally.
Well, let's find out.
I'm Mike Mason.
I'm Paul Fricker.
And this is the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition seminar. We've just got a brief kind of agenda to give you an idea of what we're thinking of talking about, but obviously we'll also answer questions towards the end as well. First of all, a bit of an overview about the process we've been through and going through with the rule set. A little bit of talk about some of the key revisions in the rules that we've looked into, and then pretty much some questions. Yeah,
sounds right.
So, in terms of the process, quick sort of overview is that we probably, 12 months plus ago, we wrote a first draft of Call of Cthulhu rulebook and an investigator's book for Chaosium. Then we've entered into a period of playtesting with those rule sets. There's been 2 rounds of playtests, round 1 and round 2, and there were open calls for anyone around the world to get involved, and quite a large number of groups did. And after each round of playtesting, obviously we've gone through all of the feedback and have made some further additions or revised further revisions to some of the stuff that we've put together. And we currently have just finished round 2 of that playtest, and we are in the process of effectively doing the final revision, which effectively will become a final draft. However, there are a few pieces that we may still look to playtest here and there with the existing playtest groups, as and when it needs to. So it's kind of a short phase of ad-hoc testing on a few things we just want to check out if we've made any significant changes to them based on some of the feedback. So we've tried to be fairly inclusive in terms of getting the opinions of the players out there and listening to those and working our kind of revision based on that feedback. And that's probably enough to say on that, really, because it's fairly dull. But Paul.
Yeah, it's a big job waiting for all the feedback, and we've got about 80 groups on the first round, I think, feedback.
Plus,
yeah. Out of 100 or so groups that play tested. And I think people have to appreciate that some people are saying, right, this bit of the rules, I love this bit, and then you've got another person coming in and saying, yeah, that bit sucks, you should take that out. So you've kind of got to use your own judgment as to balance that one against the other. But on the other hand, quite a lot of people have said put forward interesting ideas that we've then kind of incorporated or made alterations based on people's feedback. So it's really useful.
So, key areas of the rules that we thought we'd just sort of go through. Obviously we could be here all day and go through everything in fine detail, but that's quite dull really. What we wanted to talk about, a few key things. Pushing skill rolls, spending luck, use of connections, combat, clues, I think, generally. I think those are the kind of headlines.
Yeah. So these are things, a lot of these are uses of the Call of Cthulhu rules as they were previously, just kind of expressed differently. So the pushing rule, I don't know how many of you are up to date on that. How many of you were involved in the playtest? So smattering. Yeah, okay, good. The pushing rules is really whereby you're just using the standard skill roll, the skill test. So I'm driving my car, chasing the cultists, and maybe they're chasing me and I want to overtake and get away from them. Well, traditionally you'd roll your drive skill to try and get away, and you fail. Well, okay, so, you know, there's too much traffic, you can't get by, you know, they're right up your tail. Well, I want to push, story-wise, you as a player, you have to sort of say what it is you want to do that's over and above what you did before. So, well, I don't care, I'm just going to pull out into the oncoming traffic and try and swerve past and get into the gap in front. Now you're pushing the roll. Now you're really pushing it, you're taking it to its limit. You get a second roll. If things go badly on the push roll, this is where the keeper can step in with something bad, and it's not always the obvious thing, it's just something bad that happens because of that. So in that example, it may be that, you know, you smack bang into the car and it's just a road traffic accident, and, you know, you're thrown into the hedge or whatever. It may be the keeper says, okay, you failed the roll, you failed the push. Okay, you get in front of the car ahead, then the lights come on and it's an unmarked police car, or, you know, there were cultists in that car, or something that, you know, throws a spanner in the works and allows the keeper to sort of push the bad stuff on you. So the idea of the push roll, it gives the player authority to kind of escalate the situation, but at a potentially higher cost. Next, look, probably what I didn't say in terms of just prefacing the rules is in terms of the makeup of the book, in terms of what we've included is a number of optional rules. So effectively the rule book becomes a keeper's toolkit effectively for how each group wants to play the game. Because one thing we have learned from a lot of talking to lots of different groups, and the feedback is a lot of people play the game quite differently. In terms of what they get, what the fun is that they get out of the system. Luck is one of those examples, particularly, that is an optional rule. Can be used if some groups want to use it. If other groups don't like it, they don't need to use it. It is basically your luck skill, your luck characteristic. Effectively, it becomes a spendable resource. So you can alter skill rolls on a 1 point per point skill roll basis. So you can spend a point of luck to alter a skill roll. So it could be that you failed your skill roll by a couple of percentage points. You could spend 2 luck points to effectively make that roll this time, which again makes sure that the action continues in that regard, and allows players a little bit of control over, you know, moving the game forwards in that respect. So if it's something, I really wanted to make that roll, you can spend that luck to do that, and it can be any amount of luck. If you want to blow 50 points of luck to make that roll, you can. But obviously, your luck score, your luck stat, is then reduced permanently, effectively, by that spend. So if you then need to make a luck roll in the game at a later point, you're obviously rolling against your lower luck because you've spent some of those points. And luck, in terms of replenishing, we've changed, but I won't talk about that because we'll talk about that in a second with connections, yeah? So effectively, yeah, luck is, particularly the feedback we've had is that groups that like using it, they find it particularly effective in the kind of the first kind of half to 3/4 of a game, where the groups want to kind of progress the story, move forward very quickly, and not worry about having failed a library use roll or whatever it may be. They can spend some luck and then make the roll, and the story progresses accordingly. And then they reap the rewards of that at the end of the scenario, if the keeper's asking them to make a luck roll. If the Bayaki could attack anyone, the keeper might decide to make a luck roll to decide who the Bayaki attacks. So make a look for who fails it. Okay, well, the Bayaki's attacking you.
you've got a lower luck skill, you're more likely to be the one attacked in that situation, perhaps. But that's just one example. You know, use a luck roll as appropriate to your game. Yeah, that's luck.
Yeah, connections are another word for kind of personality traits and things that belong to you. Connections with the world. Really, they're that second sheet that traditionally was the second sheet of the investigator sheet, and it just brings some of those things more fully into play. So maybe character secrets or whatever might be connections, and there's an incentive to bring those into play. They're no longer linked with luck. Luck is just replenished on a dice roll per session, so it's a very limited resource. Connections are now more integrated with sanity recovery, so generally kind of between sessions, and through injury or insanity episodes, the keeper can corrupt those connections on your sheet. So it's kind of a narrative aspect to the downward spiral of insanity.
And we found that some groups like coming up with connections for their characters because they feel it gives a more defined history for their character, it gives them more personality and helps them to create a better idea of who their character is. Other groups have had it a little bit more difficult to come up with connections off the spur, so we've included some suggested sort of tables if people want to roll them randomly or want to pick them. Again, just to provide inspiration. And again, if a group doesn't want to use the tables, they just want to create their own, that's fine as well. And again, it's that kind of toolkit approach we're trying to take.
Yeah, the tables are very much intended as kind of a springboard, just to get your imagination going on. Often people create characters, but they don't really think about their family or their relationships or things like that they probably would have, but you just kind of, you create a character. Now what's the adventure? But, just give them a little bit of background in quite a quick kind of process.
Yeah, and in combat we moved from a kind of a, what should we call it?
Opposed?
Well, we moved to an opposed system.
Okay.
Yeah, we've moved to an opposed system.
Yes.
From
the old system.
The old system. So effectively, you roll to attack, and somebody who you are attacking is rolling to react to that attack in some way, which could be a dodge, it could be to attack back, and then the outcome of that roll is then determined, based on the success that was rolled by the two parties, which again, the feedback we've received seems to streamline combat a little bit. It makes it a little bit more quicker, and certainly seems to move away from the situation that you could sometimes find yourself in a combat where I miss, the opponent misses as well, and then I miss again, and I've missed again, and then by the fourth round somebody manages to hit, which it never felt very satisfying and felt quite bitty. Whereas what seems to happen now is that, in each round of combat something happens, whether it's good or bad, something happens.
Yeah, very much my intention there is to kind of have both sides feel like they're actually fighting against each other, rather than one side attacks and then the other side are attacked whilst the other side's passive. That doesn't really give the impression of combat to me. In a combat I kind of visualise both sides going at each other, and the opposed rolls kind of give me that feel.
And you wanted to talk about
about the flow of the flow of a scenario, and how we've included advice in the Keeper's chapter about designing scenarios and the flow of scenarios, and the whole issue about kind of finding clues and so on. We're including the haunting, the old scenario that's been in the rulebook for years, but we've incorporated more guidance on how to run it. So if you were a new keeper, you could kind of pick that up, and having flicked through the rules, hopefully it gives you guidance kind of step by step. And then as we proceed, there are two or three other scenarios within that kind of give you more and more freedom in more of a kind of sandbox approach to running the game. So from an opening scene, rather than having the opening scene and then you're going on to, you're picking up a clue to go to the next scene and the next scene and the next scene, trying to give people more freedom to kind of feel that they're going in the direction they want to go. That might mean that you miss a clue and you kind of go off track a bit. You know, you end up and the keeper's like, well, I don't really know where you're going. The players are a bit lost. You've still got the idea roll mechanism of the you've still got the mechanism of the idea roll there, but not as just a get out of jail free card anymore. So with the idea roll, you're going to get back on track. You're going to get back. You're going to find that clue that leads you back into the scenario. But whether you pass or fail the roll has a meaning in that if you pass it, then great, you find the clue to your advantage. If you fail it, the keeper's going to have to do a little bit of thinking, but you're going to find the clue to your disadvantage. So you end up, you know, the keeper, just like in the starting kind of in media res at the start of the scenario where you know, you might kick off a game and something bad is just happening and you've got to get your way out of it. It gives the keeper license to kind of put you back in that situation again mid-game, but you're back in the flow of the game again. So that's yeah. Obviously there's advice there about, you know, not rolling for unnecessary clues and so on, but yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, then obviously on top of that there's the general kind of keeper advice about how to write the scenario, how to run the game, which again we talk about, you know, clue placement effectively, and try not to, you know, do the classic of, you know, having a scenario ride on the identification of one particular piece of information. If that information exists in one place at one time, that may effectively hold the game if the players decide not to go to the old barn, they decide to go to the library instead, or whatever it may be. So again, the general advice that most you know, experienced keepers are aware of anyway, but just writing that in to make sure it's, you know, we give that to people who you know, are less familiar with the game effectively. It's just in the head. I think
we will say something about the player's book.
Yeah, the player's book. We've written it with the intention that most keepers obviously would buy the full core rule book. And we know that most players, well not most, but some players will buy that too. But we wanted to, you know, particularly Chaosium wanted a book that players could buy if they wanted you know, if they didn't want to buy the core book, they could buy the player's book. So that book is effectively, it does contain, you know, effectively a slightly cut down section on the rules, so somebody coming to it new as a new player can pick it up, but obviously they'll need a keeper with the rule book as well. But in that player's book, we've you know, used as inspiration the original Player's Companion, which has got obviously additional occupations and things like that in it. So you'll find that in the core book there are you know, a standard set of occupations for investigators, but in the player's book there'll be a lot more diversity. For instance, there'll also be things again around if you have war experience or you're a medical doctor and you know, what's the difference between you viewing a standard human corpse and somebody who's never viewed one before. So that kind of like take into account those kind of experience packages, if you want to call them that way. There's some ideas around those again for people come from different backgrounds. So if you're a hardcore gangster, you know, shooting somebody may not cause you as much sanity loss as, you know, the librarian who's never done it before, for instance. And the player's book will, you know, include, you know, further information about setting, 1920s, a bit about modern day equipment lists and the usual kind of stuff. Most of which is obviously already in the core book, but again, a little bit more expanded, some more information that's particularly aimed at players, including, you know, some tips on playing the game, you know, things to do, how to work your way through an investigation. Again, particularly mindful of new people coming into the game, but also useful stuff that anyone who's played the game before would find an interest in reading, maybe find one or two things and ideas in there as well. So that's kind of our highlights, as it were. But obviously, you may have some questions. So if people want to stick their hand up, we'll do our best to try and give you an answer. Yeah. what's the timescale for when we can expect it? We can't give you anything definite because we're not Chaosium, it's their call. Our understanding is they would like to get it out next year, and I would imagine that would be around Gen-Con time if all goes to plan.
As designers, what kind of, when you're running the current version of your system, which of the optional rules in the rulebook do you use, or do you mix and match? What kind of ones do you prefer as a designer?
That's the question: is what optional rules have we used, or do we use when we're running the game currently? Or do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I'd say when we've said optional rules, we've said things like the option to spend luck is an option. And to me, yeah, I just incorporate that as part of the game now. There are some options on how to generate characters. With the BRP called Cthulhu, you go to different groups, and lots of people have different opinions on how to generate characters, and opinions about the house that being related to luck and not, and all manner of things. And can you roll 3d6? Oh well, the default thing is you just roll 3d6 for strength, and so on, and that's what you got in strength. Not many people play it like that. That's how it's written though. So most people are already using an optional rule there, that you kind of shuffle your stats around, or that if you got 3 under 10, where maybe you re-roll them again or something like that. So we've incorporated maybe 3 or 4 kind of core ways of generating characters. So it seems to me it's very much, the approach I take to it is very much like a cookery recipe. So you can get a recipe for cooking chicken curry. How many recipes are there for that? There's like hundreds. So I can put one out, and you're going to say, oh yeah, but I like it a bit spicier, or I want to make vegetarian one, I'm going to use tofu instead, or I don't like courgettes, I'm going to put something else in. So people kind of want to make their Call of Cthulhu game, but impose their own ideas on it. So rather than just giving one set thing, we've kind of said, here's the set thing, and here's some suggestions for bits that you might kind of moderate your game with. I've written it pretty much how I would want to play it, really. So in terms of optional rules, there are some bits that, I guess like the spending luck bit, has been one of the most contentious bits. A lot of feedback has been that when people have done it, they've liked it. Not 100% so, but so we felt that making that an option was probably the best approach, because then those that don't like it can just leave it out, and if you want to put it in, well, it's straightforward. In terms of other optional rules, I think largely it's kind of how you apply the rules themselves in your game. It's kind of hard to. Can you say more?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of kind of semi-regular play groups who, over the last couple of years or so, have played different iterations of the rule set with me. So they're quite familiar now with some of the different sorts of things we've done, and so I started a new game with them last week, and I said to them, okay, so well, look, officially it's an optional skill, so I'm going to ask you as a group, do you want to use it? They all said yes. And another option, for instance, I used the saying to them, well, when you create characters, there's a 75% skill cap on your skills, unless you can justify why yours is above that. And again, that was effectively an optional thing. Every group that I've come across, who I've asked a question, demoed the rule set at some different conventions, and I've said, I've started the game with explaining the outline of using luck and things like that, and said, do you want to use it or not? Quite happy if you don't. They've gone yes, and they've enjoyed using it. But some groups don't like using it, and that's cool.
yeah, the skill cap thing is one that passed me by. I mean, I don't know if it's just the players that I play with or what, but it's never really been a big issue. You know, people have made up their characters quite freely, and if they wanted to have, I don't know, 90% in something, that hasn't really been a problem. But obviously for some playtesters, that's been a real big issue with certain players who will kind of max out their character in certain aspects. So putting that kind of, you know, it may be an issue for your group, it may not be. So if you want to stick in, you know, 75% cap on starting skills, stick it in.
We're all out, but it's entirely up to you. What we're trying to stress throughout the book, at the end of the day, like any role-playing game, and most role-playing games will say, at the end of the day, the keeper runs the game, they make the call. You know, people want to change that number, that's their game.
So that's kind of a sliding scale rather than a whole optional rule that kind of changes the game. It's just kind of scaling it as you want to play it.
That's kind of, yeah, and you know, toolkit-wise, there are certain things that are definitely a thing you can include or not. And the rest, as with any rule set, is that scale, as Paul said. You've got to find the level that your group likes to play at. You know, if you do like a really pulpy style of play, then perhaps you will scale things slightly differently to another group. But you know, that's your call, and the rules allow you to do that.
But I don't understand the anxiety that is expressed on some quarters that, you know, make it too easy on people or too difficult on people. In Call of Cthulhu, there's no sense of challenge rating. There's no sense of, you know, well, we're starting characters, we should only be facing like 2 rules to every player character. No, if you're keeper, if you decide there's like 10 Dark Young outside the room, then there is. You know, it's up to you as keeper to kind of scale that challenge as appropriately as you wish. We give guidance on that, but you know, I don't care if you got 90% shotgun or 99% shotgun. Yeah, it's Call of Cthulhu. It's not going to help you against the human cultists or whatever, but ultimately it's not going to save you, is it? And that whole thing of when it comes to guns, that means the game's gone badly. Where did that come from? I don't know.
I don't know either, but I mean, you know, if your players do decide to tool upon the shotguns at all 99%, then I think your cultists need to get wise and start slapping, you know, lawsuits on them or murder charges, perhaps. You know, cultists are intelligent types, they won't stand there being blasted by a guy with a shotgun if they don't need to be. So, you know, again, this is how you choose to approach your game.
It doesn't look like a gunfight.
Anymore.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how the combat will actually play out in a supposed sense of blow by blow?
Example of combat, blow by blow. Oh.
Yeah, okay, so
we can act now.
Yeah, we want to live role play it. The idea being that when you are confronted, the ghoul jumps out and you say, okay, and I'd say to you, okay, the ghoul's charging at you, it's just burst out from behind this gravestone, it's clawing at your face. What are you doing? And you're going to say, what are you doing? You.
Screaming, jumping backwards, probably.
Okay, so that sounds like dodging to me. As keeper right here, he's screaming and jumping back. That's dodging. Okay, so roll your dodge, I'll roll my attack, and we see what happens.
So higher.
Okay. And the higher, there's levels of success. So there's on your sheet under combat skills, you'll have these numbers written down. So let's say you've got 50% in dodge, just to be simplistic. Your 50%, your half would be 25, your fifth would be 10. And you'd say either you failed, I got a success, I got a half, or I got a extreme success under a fifth. And I just rolled the ghoul's attack, and whoever got the best level of success, that's, yeah, to be, cut a long story short, that's pretty much it. So either you dodge out the way, or I've clawed your face off, depending on damage roll. And then we kind of go back and forth like that. So there's that sense of, if you had said, okay, well, I'm standing there and trying to, you know, stab it with a knife, then obviously you'd be rolling your fighting attack, I'd be rolling my fighting attack, and it's which one gets the blow in best.
I'll probably just to jump in on that. The first seminar we did, we talked about fighting, and we talked about combining some of the fighting skills into kind of one skill, like fighting and firearms. Again, through feedback and playtests, we've kind of like eased off that, and you'll find that firearms is split up by kind of weapon types, and fighting again, there's a base kind of like brawling skill, which includes, you know, your punching and whatnot. But if you're using a sword, that's a different skill set in that sense, so that's a separate skill. So we've kind of broken that back out a little bit more. Perhaps not as much as it was before, but we've kind of weapon grouped it with what makes sense, I think. Yeah.
How does that work with like a group combat or initiative?
No, you're still using Dex initiative. There's another optional rule actually for if you want to roll for initiative, so you don't have that same order of priority every time. So there's a mechanism in there for rolling, and then you stick with that for that combat. But you're still going around, so you know, if you were the chap that asked about the ghoul attacking, if he was highest on the Dex order, then you know he could say what he was doing first before the ghoul acts, maybe. But if he's then attacking the ghoul gets to attack back if it wishes. Oh. Any more? Carry on. Over there.
About professions, you've got some skills in the profession, so if you're a library user now, do you think that you should have to put points in there, your base allocated pool, say plus 10 points, because you're a librarian, because 20 skills no different to any other character, any other profession?
The question is, if you are your particular profession's skill, if there is a skill for that particular profession, like a librarian with library use, should you be required to put more points into it, effectively, because you're a librarian? Well, I mean, there's an argument to say that, certainly. I think we err on the side of letting the player decide, because you could still be a bad librarian, or you could still be a new librarian, so your skill may not be up in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, it's player choice, isn't it? It's defined by your character in a sense.
Yeah, that's something I toyed with the idea that, okay, well I've chosen this profession, and okay, well that means in these 8 skills that tie to your profession, they all start off at 50% or something. But I don't really see that much benefit of doing that over just saying, okay, well you've got, whatever it is, 300 points to spend among those skills, and this player, you put them away with it.
I mean, my experience, many years of playing, I've had players who have put pretty much all their skill points into like 3 or 4 skills, they've all maxed them out. So they've been really cool at that one thing, and for the rest of the game they've sat there rolling failures, and pretty soon, second game they play, they go, I think I can roll that differently now, make a more balanced character, because everyone else seems to be having more fun than me. It's not something I don't think we necessarily need to rule in, as it were, in that sense. But again, player advice in terms of trying to create a relatively believable character that you can kind of identify with, that you want to play in the game, that makes sense. Again, we talk about player parties and groups about try and work with the keeper and create investigators that kind of make sense to the game, so it feels right. Why is the rich playboy hanging out with the hobo? What's going on there? Is there a really cool story of that, or is it just not really meshing together in terms of believability? Try and bring those thoughts to the game to make it work for you from the keeper's perspective and from the players. Yeah.
How do sanity mechanics else then? Especially if you have this like connections sort of character spiral with this.
Sure. That's how the sanity works.
Yeah, sanity at its core is pretty much the same as previously. So you encounter something sanity blasting, you make a sanity roll, you lose some sanity. There's a bit more structure on when you go insane. So there's some, there's always an initial bout of madness, which is kind of losing the plot for a short time, followed by a longer period of kind of latent insanity when you're kind of on a knife edge. And that longer period, just go back a step, that short period, that bout of madness, the keeper kind of declares what your character's doing. Down to the group, the keeper might just tell you how you should play your character. Essentially, control of your character is taken away for that short time. With longer period of latent insanity.
I was just going to butt in and say, but obviously, you know, as with any inexperienced group, players sometimes come out with better suggestions than the keeper. So,
absolutely,
you know, there's no reason why you can't. You know, the keeper has to, if it's a, you know, the player comes up with a cool idea of what they're doing in their bout of madness, right? Yeah.
The longer period of insanity, you're back in complete control of your character, but you're kind of on a knife edge. So if it's temporary insanity, that's maybe for like D10 hours. If it's indefinite insanity, then we're talking, you know, a long time. But you're kind of on a knife edge there, so even just the point of sand loss is going to tip you over into this kind of another bout of madness. So you're really kind of on a knife edge. We've included guidance for delusions. So, because I figure that role-playing insanity should be more akin to the insanity we see in films such as 12 Monkeys springs to mind, and things where they're kind of seeing and hearing things that are kind of entertaining and they're not sure what's real and what's not. You know, real-world mental illness and the realistic side effects of mental illness. I don't know, I don't really see a great deal of appeal in playing those.
I don't think that it's just fun in that sense, you know what I mean? So
playing
whereas, you know,
cataleptic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it could be that your character does withdraw from the game for a short period, but to say that character's now pretty much withdrawn from the most of the game is, well, it's kind of ended that player's fun for the rest of the game, really. They're not going to take much involvement.
Let's go back to how that relates to connections. In the downtime, when you're doing your experience checks, you're rolling for skill improvement, that's when you might decide that as a player you want to spend some time with one of your connections and try to recover some sanity. So in the downtime you might say how you're going on a family holiday, if your family is one of your connections, and, you know, trying to forget all this terrible stuff that's happening. Then through, you know, role play that for a few minutes, and then there's a role involved, and if that goes well, then yeah, you're feeling better, you're refreshed after your holiday. If that goes badly, that connection is pretty much written off. You know, you went on the holiday, you spent every night, you know, poring over this musty old manuscript, and you know, you alienated your family. You know, you're Jack Torrance in the hotel, and yeah. So that connection is kind of torn to shreds.
There's another hand. Yeah.
Yeah, when Cthulhu was released, it seemed very much to retort to a lot of the issues in the Cthulhu RPG. Now that it's kind of the other way around, that exists, you guys have been working on this. How mindful have you had to be of Cthulhu's existence?
I'll answer that first because I've never read Trail of Cthulhu. So purposefully, because I knew we were going to do this project, I didn't genuinely want to be influenced in a sense, and I didn't want to feel that I was unconsciously emulating anything unnecessarily. That's my personal take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've read it, and you know, you can't unread things. So I've read it. I'd say that I didn't purposely set out to emulate it or copy the things from it. I mean, once something has been created and you've experienced it, and you go on to make things, people are always going to compare what you've made with what's gone before. There was no particular intention to do either way. So you just kind of make the best of what you can. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, just to continue continuation of that, what does Call of Cthulhu do differently to Cthulhu to justify why play one rather than one as you see
I think you've got a system, and it influences the game you play. So if you would play it with the Savage World system, you're going to have a different experience. If you play it with Trail, you're going to have a different experience. You know, if you played it with Rollmaster or D20, all those systems, they kind of emphasise different aspects of play. I can't give you a concrete answer to say the game would be more like this, but the game would feel more like Call of Cthulhu. It's, yeah. Sorry, I can't. It's hard to make those comparisons, but certainly it's probably different experience-wise.
Anyone else?
Yeah. At the start of the process, did you have sort of a decent idea of what you wanted it to look like at the end, as in a lot more of the modules, or did that come out of playtesting and basically just an idea of the goals and direction you had for the redesign?
Did we have a kind of an idea of when we started what we wanted it to be at the end, I guess, in a sense? In a way, I think so. Partly, but you can never, I mean, with a property that already exists, you know, you can start with the intention that what you're looking to do is just to ensure that you try not to, you don't want to break anything that works really well. You don't want to change how the game effectively plays or the feel of the game. Being key goals is to sort of say, well, we're not actually writing a new game. It's actually just a revision of an existing game. So that's, with that in mind, that's kind of where we started. And then I guess that, while at the time we didn't unpackage that into so that means this will be these optional rules and this will be there and that will be there, because we hadn't really started it. We just had those kind of like notions in mind, and we had notions from our own experience and from conversations from numerous players and games we played with over the years, and that we'd identified some things that didn't seem so smooth, that we felt we could perhaps tease around a bit and make it a little bit more smoother. They were our kind of starting intentions, and I think as we've gone through the experience and we've listened to feedback and everyone's questions, some of those have been expanded more, into the kind of more kind of like the toolkit-based approach, which allows that kind of adaptation and optionality. Given the game of this age, that there's most groups tend to do things a little differently here or there, even if it's only one thing. So ensuring that that's enshrined in the rules effectively, saying, yeah, that's okay. I think that was that way. That was highlighted when we were running games as part of a group of the Cult Keepers, which Mike headed. We ran some scenarios. One of us would write a scenario, and other keepers would run it among the group, and it became very apparent, hearing how other people had run it. Even sometimes when we were running literally parallel games, when we ran Gatsby, people ran really differently. The same thing on paper, if it was in one keeper's hands, it was like they were running around with hockey mallets beating each other to death within about 10 minutes. In another one, it was like, a sedate experience, drinking cocktails on the lawn. And this was from the same thing on the page. And so you want to try and facilitate different keepers to run the game how they want to run it, because they're going to get the book and they're going to run it how they want to run it. So try and sort of support them in doing that. My vision from the start was really going back to two things. One was to make it backwards compatible, and that's been a kind of a mixed blessing. It's kind of been a rod for our own backs. To keep everything backwards compatible. It's always been at the heart of everything. And it's kind of one of those constraints that, I guess, like, writing sonnets or something where you've got to fit it into that certain number of lines and a structure and a rhythm and everything. Great art sort of comes through that. I think having the
the constraints of making it backwards compatible and keeping those things in there was maybe a constructive thing. If you can do anything, then sometimes it's difficult to know what to do. And going back to the old editions that, you know, from like, I started the second edition, and it was just like a slim volume and everything's in there, and I felt that really fired my imagination, just flicking through that. And there's lots of great stuff in there. I just went back and reread that numerous times and then tried to kind of get back to that. I mean, the word count is going to be much greater, but just tried to go back to that and capture the essence of that. So
luck is a vital stat, as we all are aware of, but do you think it's fair that the party luck is based on the lowest person in the party's luck, or do you think it should be a mean value for whoever's in the party? Because you find yourself, if you're not role playing properly, you find yourself saying, if you go to the library, you look off you go, and we're going to do that thing. Because Gary was obviously had the lowest luck in our party when we were playtesting. He was at the front of the party, he was always getting shot at. So we were saying, like, you go 30 yards in front of us, you get shot at. So what do you think? Do you think it should be a mean value?
So should luck be a mean value or based, the party's luck be a mean value or based on the lowest member's luck?
And bear in mind, if he spends his luck,
so he penalises the rest of the group, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, well, I mean, for me, that strikes me as very much down to what does your group want to do? And so to me, that sounds like, you know, some groups will say, well, you know, it's a good bit of self-policing to sort of, you know, say, stop spending all your luck, so because you keep bringing us down. And it's almost like, you know, he becomes, you know, his nickname becomes Lucky, and that becomes part of the narrative. But equally, another group might want to do a mean-tested luck. I personally don't have an opinion on either. I think both are kind of valid, and I think, you know, the rules allow you to do.
I think if it creates a bit of tension, then in a good way, then that's good. You know, if it creates tension that, oh, I don't really want to spend more luck, so then I'm going to lower the party luck. That can be a good thing. It kind of creates a nervousness to spend it, which is desirable. When it comes to having the lowest luck, yeah, I think that should affect the party. Not necessarily that it's him that gets shot on the party luck. It's something bad that happens to the party. If it was something happening to just one person among the group, then yeah, I'd just go with the person with the lowest luck. It happens to them. But as Mike said, yeah, I guess if you, I don't know, it seems a bit maths heavy then to be figuring who's got the mean or not.
As I say, it comes down to that kind of level of decision. You know, the standard rule is, as you said, you know, the person with the lowest luck, if you're going to make a party roll, you know, is the one that effectively is making the luck roll. That's the kind of the standard, but there is no reason.
But it's just the kind of thing people will house rule. And that's just the kind of thing we want to sort of throw in and say, you know, if we want it to house rule that way, fine, it doesn't really change the game. It's just tailoring it to the way your vision. And over 30 years, you know, some people have been playing the game for 30 years and they've got a pretty strong vision of how they like to play it. Yeah.
Any more? Yeah.
Well, ask about tones, because currently, you know, it seems quite mechanistic, a bit kind of dull in some ways, possibly, you know, it's just a set of stats on a page. Have you changed that in any way to make it a bit more evocative and closer to fiction?
The question about tones and whether we've been able to make the tones a little bit more evocative, maybe come out from the stats that sit on the page. I think, yeah, what we're trying to do with the tones is we've not, you know, we haven't, you know, changed what's in an economic on, for instance, you know, but we have up front when we talk about, you know, tones generally and how we use them in games and ideas. You know, we've tried to layer some ideas in, you know, how do you want to use tones in the games? You know, are the books inherently evil of themselves, or are they just containing, you know, outlandish information?
I think,
but equally, the believer.
Oh no, I wasn't actually. I was going to say. the whole thing with tomes, I think it's tomes or monsters or maybe artifacts are a kind of integral part of the scenario that you're running. So you or the person writing the scenario should have a pretty strong idea of what that tome or monster means in this scenario. It's not a typical fantasy game where you go into the next room and there's 6 goblins. It's the monsters and tomes and so on in the story are an important part of the story. And when Lovecraft sat down to craft these stories, I don't think he was too precious about the canon he'd created. So if he wanted to throw in this book or this being in a different form, then tailor that to suit the story he was writing. And I think that's what we want to tell keepers. Just because somebody wrote a scenario where such and such happened, or the description of the monster says it's like this, you can take that and you can change it if you've got a different picture of it. It's that one scenario or that one campaign. It doesn't have to be the same as my campaign. You can do what you want with it. So the fiction of it, you tailor it to your vision. And we've kind of written about that in the Keepers chapter to try and encourage you to do that. So you feel less constrained and more inspired. That would be the hope. When you read the tome, the guy that goes off to Lovecraft's story, The Mountains of Madness, Dyer, the guy, the main character, he has read the Necronomicon. And he's like, yeah, I read this crazy book, but all rubbish. So you can read these things, and we can go, just a few streets from here and buy some magical tomes, magic in inverted commas tomes. And there are people in the world that believe them, and there are people in the world that won't. So you could read the Necronomicon, and maybe it does. You don't give it credit. So you could be a non-believer in that. You still gain the Cthulhu mythos knowledge. You're still gaining. Dyer read that stuff about Chaosium and all the so on. So you knew all that stuff. Like we know about Doctor Who. Okay. The moment you get real experience of that, and you go, oh my god, it's true, that's when all that Cthulhu mythos kicks in and you lose a big load of sanity. When the TARDIS appears in your room, you're going to realise all that other stuff you know about, that's true. I don't know why I've gone down the Doctor Who route, but it's kind of a parallel.
And you can choose, depending on how your character perceives your character, when you decide to read the lurid tome in front of you, then are you believing what you're reading? And it's a yes or no effectively, and that will depend on whether you defer.
But it's a one-time deal. Once you experience the mythos,
then you can't disbelieve it. You've seen things that no man should see, as it were.
And the whole thing about reading tomes, you've got that kind of guidance in there to how long it takes, but if you decide in your scenario that this is taking place over one night in a haunted mansion and they find this old tome, well, if the guy's going to sit down and read it for a couple of hours and have his mind blown by it, then fine. If that's the way it fits into your story, go for that.
Yeah.
2 questions related to this.
Okay.
How big is the book? The rules do you think, and what percentage of it is rewritten fresh?
So the question is, how big is the book, and what percentage of it has been rewritten or refreshed in that regard? Well, all of it has been reviewed. Yeah, good word. Yeah, all of it has been reviewed. So we have, we've gone through line by line and written it to be a cohesive whole. So that would mean that whilst a lot of it may be still familiar, and some lines may be identical to what they were before, actually the majority has been rewritten to as prose.
The same words in a different order.
Yeah,
that's what it's saying.
And they have.
I think the primary things that haven't changed are like your descriptions of tomes, your descriptions of monsters, your kind of reference materials.
I'm not going to read all Lovecraft's bits.
A lot of the spells are very similar with a few modifications, some chopped out, things like that. But the keeper's advice, player's advice, character generation, and various kind of rules bits are all kind of written up from scratch. with a strong view to kind of what went before.
And how big it is a difficult question to answer because we haven't laid it out. Obviously, it hasn't yet. But you know, it will be probably of similar size. I don't know, give or take, maybe a little bit less, maybe a bit more than your current Call of Cthulhu rule book.
Yeah, it's going to be
there's new adventures in it, and some of them are bigger than others. It's difficult to give you a page count at this point.
But it's not going to be like it's not going to be hugely different in size.
We've got time for one more-ish or so. Yeah, Rob.
Sure. Short question. Hardcover or softcover?
Sorry, say again.
Hardcover or softcover?
Hardcover or softcover. That's not really down to us, that's very much down to Chaosium. I mean, I imagine almost certainly there'll be hardcover editions, whether than PDF and so on, whether there'll be softcover, I don't know. We're not, you know, involved in that aspect. Should we take one more?
One more?
Is there one more? Got it? Yeah.
Last one, I promise. Assisted skill roll. Did you make the decision that 2 ticks if you get below the percent of the assisting?
Yeah, we decided to scrap those.
Did you?
Yeah. They seem to add a level of complexity that could actually be... the question was about assisted skill rolls, and we had this idea about, you know, if several people were working on something and how that would impact on each other. Yeah, ultimately in the next iteration, I think we're going to cut those out. We just kind of... It's really easy when you're making rules to make them more complicated. And the hard thing is to do what you want to do, but kind of strip it back and simplify it. And then over the last few months, that's kind of been the constant struggle to kind of say, do you really need that bit in there? No, I think we can just cut that out or kind of file that back a bit and make that a bit simpler. Does it really impact the game? No, it still does. If it still kind of does what we want it to do, fine. Cut it back. Okay, and with that,
I think more or less on time. So we will close. So thank you for your questions. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Cthulhu will continue to have a massive input in both literacy, literacy I suppose is the right word, and the gaming world. Cthulhu is something that has captivated people's imagination since Chaosium came out with the first draft ever.
Well, since the 20s and H.P. Lovecraft's original stories, I think there's definitely something unique about this particular genre of horror. And the sheer inevitability of your defeat. And what's interesting is some of the mechanics that they brought in. Although it's nice that they've said, look, these are optional things. Yeah. You know, we don't require you to do these things. Take them as you want. And I think that's really nice because Cthulhu should be a little bit chaotic. It shouldn't be written down in stone. It's not paranoia. No. You know, where the other game where you will inevitably die. Yeah. And I think there should be an element of seriousness to it. And I think that the idea of having optional things like luck and so on, the new issues that have come in, actually I think will enhance it because you can pick and choose what you want.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that probably is what's going to give them an edge over the existing edition. Because one of the things that people have been quite, smirky about is why a new edition. I have been a little bit like that because the current one is very good and the amount of material there is absolutely ginormous, but it feels like they're going in the right direction toward giving the player and the keeper a lot more flexibility.
Well, to be realistic, if you produce a game it's like the everlasting light bulb. If you make an everlasting light bulb, you only sell one. And then so to an extent there has to be some kind of push forward, but there has been an evolution in role-playing games. There has been some change. And some of those things are reflected in the new rules. But if we want them to carry on producing other things in the mythos, they need to have a money train. They need to have a way to generate revenue to pump prime some of these other things. So, and it's the way of the world, I mean, look at Dungeons and Dragons Pathfinder version 3, 4, 3.5, 4, 5. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yes, indeed, and I think they will get it. They will get it right. I think these two guys are way too shrewd not to get it right. They are going into the right direction, I believe. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they will come out with.
It's just about building the new community because I have a community around the game. They're okay.